Hello all, welcome to Java session. My name is Shishira Bhatt and I work as technical architect, and in today's class we're going to understand one of the Java concept called constructor chaining. In our previous sessions and in previous classes we understood a concept called constructor. You must already be knowing that constructor is used for two purposes. The first one is object creation, and the second one initialization. So if you have any doubts in these two along with constructor, you can watch my previous videos in YouTube. Okay, so I don't want to discuss any more on those topics. Let us understand what is the meaning of constructor chaining with a realistic example. Right now I'm going to write a class. Some class. Okay, let's say an example of vehicle. I have a class called vehicle class, and I do have one more class. This class is called as car class. Now car class extends vehicle class. Now when a class called car extends a vehicle class can be considered as a superclass or the base class, and car class can be considered as the child class. Right? It can be considered as a child class or the subclass. Now when a car class extends a vehicle class or a superclass, the subclass automatically gets all the states and behaviors inherited to subclass. That is, whatever the states which is declared in this vehicle superclass along with the behaviors are inherited to the subclass. But remember, the constructors are not inherited. Only states and behaviors are inherited, but the constructors are not inherited. Right? So we also know that, and we have understood that whenever we write any class, automatically we get a constructor and we call that as default constructor. Right? And the purpose of the default constructor helps in or indicates the JVM to create an object, and also it helps to initialize the variables. For example, I have the vehicle. There are some variables, instance variables in this class. For example, string model of the vehicle. I'm talking about common properties. I'm talking about very common properties. String model, and then string registration number of this vehicle, and let's say the last one, double price. Right? So these are all the properties of this vehicle. Similarly, the car may have any of its own specialized features which is not there in the vehicle. For example, car can have AC. The AC may not be present in the vehicle. Correct? The car may have the music system. Music system may not be present in the vehicle. Correct? So what we need to understand here is, so a vehicle class has a constructor called vehicle, and the car class has also a constructor called car. Remember, the car constructor is responsible for initializing the states of only the car class, and the vehicle constructor is responsible for initializing the states of vehicle class. Understand? So the conclusion is this: the constructor of the class is responsible for initializing the states of that particular class, states of this particular class. Okay, now let us see a small example. I write a class called as a class. Though it's not advisable to create a classes like A, B and all, but still just for easy understanding I'm writing it. And I write a class called B class. Let's say the B class extends A class. It means to say A is the superclass and the B is the subclass. Definitely A do have the constructor and B class also do have the constructor. Let us take an example of some instance variable. For example, integer I, and here let's say okay, double D. Now, when I create an object of the B class, when I create an object of this B class, how do I create? I can either create by using new B anonymous object, this is called calling the constructor, or I can just say B reference equal to new B. Choice is yours. You can create an object by calling the constructor using the new keyword. Now, we also know the basics of inheritance, that is when a class inherits, that is extends another class, all the properties are inherited to the subclass. Now, with the concept of inheritance, can we say an object of B class is created? Because new B means object of B class is created in some memory location. Okay, and in this object, the states of the B class, what are the states or instance variables of the B class? D is shared. Along with this, the inherited is also shared. What is inherited to the subclass? The instance variable called I is inherited to the subclass, hence I is also shared. So there are two variables which are shared now. One is called day and the other one is called I. But we need to know one thing very clearly. We are calling only the constructor of B. We are not at all calling the constructor of A. So when the B constructor is called, it is going to initialize the states or instance variables of that class. So what are the instance variables of the B class? Instance variable called D. So data type is double. Hence it is initialized to 0.0 default value. And this B constructor does not initialize the states of A class. Now who is responsible for doing it? Only A constructor. But I am not calling the A constructor. Then question is how the variable called I is getting initialized. Okay, it is going to be initialized to a default value that is 0, and if you print, for example, if you print system.out.println of a reference dot I, it prints the value of 0. But we didn't initialize it, and we didn't call even the constructor of A, but still it is getting initialized, and that initialization happens only by calling the constructor of A, which certainly I am not doing it. So question is, then how the A constructor is called, how this initialization happens? That is called constructor chaining. Now what happens in Java is, whenever any class constructor is written, whether it is custom constructor, whether it is default constructor, whenever any constructor is present, the first line of the code in that constructor is calling its immediate superclass constructor. what is the immediate superclass? A. So any constructor of a class, remember, any constructor of a class, whether it is a subclass, whether it is a superclass, whether it is any class, and any type of constructor, whether it is custom constructor or whether it is default constructor, the first line of code in the constructor is calling its immediate superclass constructor by using a keyword called super. By using a keyword called super. Okay, and it does not call by using name. It calls by using something called super with this brace, open and then close. Because of this, the constructor of a class is called, and that a class constructor initializes the value of I to its default value. And this process of calling an immediate superclass constructor by any constructor is called as constructor chaining. Okay, let us see small examples to get a better clarity on this. Let's say, for example, with respect to some we will take an example of some example we will consider. Let's say a class called super sup, and I have a class called subclass. I have a class called subclass. Subclass extends superclass. Subclass extends superclass. And here I take an example of integer I equal to 10, and here I have integer j equal to 30. Integer j equal to 30. Now I do write one more constructor here which can be called as custom constructor, and the class name and the constructor name is same. Okay, and here I write one more constructor called as sub constructor. So it looks like the default constructor, but it is called as custom constructor. Okay, it is not the default constructor because it is written by me, a developer. Okay, if it is supplied by compiler, it is called as default constructor. Okay, whenever we write a constructor, it is called custom constructor. Now you tell me, what is the first line of code in all these constructor? The first line of code is to call any superclass constructor or its immediate superclass constructor by using a keyword called super. Even if we don't write it automatically, okay, let me explain in this way. I will not write it. Okay, now what I'll do is, somewhere I write a code like subclass reference equal to new subclass. Now what happens? This reference start referring to an object of subclass, okay, and I is shared. Also subclass, since it is extending superclass, j is also shared because j is inherited to subclass and the object is of subclass. Hence I, j both are shared with the object because it is an object of what? Subclass. And I'm calling only subclass constructor, but it initializes the I value to 10 and also it initializes the j value to 30. But this constructor does not initializes its superclass properties. It is going to simply internally going to call something called super. It's going to call something called super. Because you are calling it as automatically this line, okay, it's going to call this constructor is going to initialize the value of j to 30. This is called constructor chaining. Okay. Let's say we are going to write some more constructor. Okay, some more constructor in the super class. For example, like this. Now I write a class. I write a class called as A. Now what do I do? In this class, I write, let's say, two constructors. I write two constructors, okay? One is A, which takes integer I. Let me make it more simple in the beginning or in this example. Let's say I have only one constructor called A, okay? And I write a subclass. I write a class called as B, which extends A class, which extends A class. Fine. Now, somewhere I write a code. The moment when I write this code, compiler gives an error. Compilation error. The compilation error and the dot class itself will not be generated. Forget about we running the program, executing the program and all. That compilation error, the dot class itself is not generated the moment when we write it. Okay. Let us see a practical example here, the same code. I'm going to write a class, simple class called as A, okay, in this particular package. I'm going to write it a constructor with example integer I. Now I write one more class called as B class. This B class extends a class called A class, and observe B is giving an error here. You can observe the error, right? Compilation error. The reason for this is pretty simple. You need to go back to the basics. Whenever we write any class, okay, a default constructor is supplied by the compiler, correct? And whenever we write our own constructor, this is called custom constructor. We call it as what? Custom constructor. We call it as custom constructor. And the moment we write this custom constructor, the default constructor is not supplied by the compiler, correct? Since I have written my own constructor, which is called as custom constructor, then default constructor is not present. Now, how does, and did I write any constructor in the B class? Of course no. Hence, for the B class, automatically there will be one constructor, so given by the compiler. Or for the B class, there will be one. For the B class, there is a default constructor. That default constructor looks like this. B. This is how it looks. It is provided by compiler. This is how it looks, and internally it is going to call, because first line is super, it's going to call like this. What is the meaning of super? The meaning of super is that it is calling its immediate superclass. What is the immediate superclass of B? A. It is nothing but as if you are calling the constructor of A. Though the constructor we are not calling by the name, and just for your understanding I'm writing this, okay? So the B class, the first line of code is super. It is calling its immediate superclass constructor A, and observe we are not passing, or it is not calling any parameterized constructor. We have only one constructor in a class called parameterized constructor, but here the subclass constructor calls what? A zero param constructor. It is also called a zero argument constructor. That's why it's giving an error. Just observe the error message. Implicit super construct. One second. Just observe. Implicit super constructor A is undefined. So the subclass is trying to find a zero parameterized constructor inside the superclass. Since it is not available, it gives an error. Now what to do? We have two choices. First choice is that provide one more constructor like this, and the moment when I am going to save this, observe the error will go off here. Observe the error went off, correct? So that is the moment we write this constructor. Can I call it as constructor overloading? That is, in a class I have multiple constructors which are changed in the signature. It is called constructor overloading. This also we already understood. So now what happens? The subclass constructor is trying to access its superclass zero parameterized or zero argument constructor, which is available here. That's why the error went off. Option number 1. Option number 2, let's say I don't want to give one more constructor here in this class. I don't want to give it. Now obviously you get an error. Now what should I do then? Then you can write custom constructor in the subclass. Custom constructor in the subclass. Now first line of code is to call its immediate superclass constructor and pass some value. Clear? This is custom constructor. In the custom constructor, I am calling immediate superclass constructor, that is a constructor, by using a keyword super. The moment when I call super, it is taking a parameter, hence you need to pass some argument. What argument I am passing? 10. Okay, I just print the value system.out.println inside constructor, and then I print the value of I. Okay, calling from this. Now just write the main method and just create an object of B, new B. What happens? You are creating an object of B class, hence B constructor is called. It is internally calling the superclass constructor. It goes and calls this constructor. And remember, when you are calling in your custom constructor, when you are calling superclass constructor, it must be the first call, right? You cannot write B constructor. Now what happens is this is the first executable line of code, correct? And then you are calling super. So when in any constructor, first executable line of code must be calling other class or calling other constructor, correct? This must be the first executable line of code. First executable line of code. Now I run the program. Say application start, application end. The moment when I run application start and then application end and then application start, calling this constructor, B class constructor, which internally calls the superclass constructor, then it's going to print and then application is going to end. Just run the program. Application start, inside constructor 10, B constructor, and then application end, right? So this is how the constructor chaining works. Okay, so thanks for watching this session. We will see you in some other Java sessions. Have a nice day.